America's theme park boom looked unstoppable, until suddenly, it wasn't. Attendance is dropping, operating costs are spiking, and parks once considered untouchable are now quietly fighting to survive. The warning signs were ignored for years, but the breaking point isn't coming anymore. It's here. This isn't just an industry shift, it's a change families will feel in pricing, crowds, closures, and experiences. Some parks won't make it to 2026, and the fallout could change every vacation plan going forward. The big question now is, could your favorite park be next? Playland. Once alive with laughter, Fresno's Playland now echoes with ghosts. Playland in Fresno wasn't built for spectacle or corporate branding. It was built for families who worked hard all week and wanted one simple thing: a Saturday that felt like freedom. The scent of popcorn, the crackle of music drifting from tinny speakers, and the hum of old rides painted the kind of Americana that has nearly vanished from the map. Playland opened its gates in 1955, born from the optimism of post-war America and the belief that communities could build their own joy. Generations of families came through those turnstiles, celebrating birthdays, first dates, and countless sticky summer nights. Every creak of its wooden carousel and every echo from the miniature train carried a reminder of a time when entertainment was built by neighbors, not corporations. But by 2025, that humble dream could no longer hold out. Attendance fell sharply as travelers turned toward big-name destinations with million-dollar attractions and digital screens. Insurance costs rose, maintenance bills grew heavier, and the aging infrastructure became too costly to keep alive. When the final announcement came that Playland would close, it wasn't met with outrage, it was met with quiet heartbreak. Locals gathered for one last photo beside the faded sign, as if saying goodbye to a relative who had been part of the family for 70 years. Playland's fall wasn't just about money, it was about time. Small parks, like it used to form the backbone of American recreation, giving every town its own pocket of wonder. Now, they're disappearing beneath the weight of a culture that measures fun by spectacle instead of spirit. For those who remember its glowing lights, reflected in the calm water of the park lake, the loss cuts deep. It feels like watching a piece of childhood rust away in slow motion. Even now, if you walk through Roding Park, where Playland once stood, you can still trace the outlines of what was there. You can almost hear the laughter that used to rise into the warm Fresno air. The empty foundation where the carousel spun still smells faintly of oil and cotton candy when the wind shifts. It's a ghost of an era when joy didn't require a smartphone or a marketing campaign, just a few rides, a willing crowd, and a summer night. Playland's closure marked the first clear signal that the cracks in America's amusement world were spreading faster than anyone wanted to admit. What fell in Fresno was more than a local park. It was the end of an idea that small-town fun could stand its ground against billion-dollar empires. And as its gates locked for the last time, a bigger storm was already brewing farther east, where another beloved park would soon learn that nostalgia alone can't keep the lights on. Dixie-Landon Theme Park. Under Louisiana's heavy skies, Dixie-Landon fought to survive. Dixie-Landon Theme Park was never about luxury or record-breaking attractions. It was about tradition. It was about laughter echoing across the bayou air, and the comfort of knowing that for one more season, the gates would open, the lights would glow, and the rides would sing their familiar mechanical song. Generations grew up under that bright southern sun, riding the same coasters their parents once did, making the same memories, and walking the same worn wooden boards that held together the heart of Baton Rouge amusement. When it first opened in the late 1990s, Dixie-Landon felt like a promise kept to the community. The companion park, Blue Bayou, had already given locals a place to cool off, but Dixie-Landon brought the thrill, the clatter of roller coasters, the whirl of steel swings, the sticky sweetness of funnel cakes, and the hum of small-town joy. It wasn't polished, and that was the beauty of it. You could feel the South in every corner, the smell of fried food, the buzz of cicadas, and the warmth of people who greeted each other like old friends, even if they had never met before. For years, the park stood strong, weathering storms both literal and financial. When hurricanes came, repairs were made. When attendance dipped, the owners found ways to keep the gates open. It was a labor of love, run by people who believed that fun didn't have to come from billion-dollar corporations or multi-park franchises. But the 2010s and 2020s brought a wave of change that few local parks could survive. Corporate entertainment expanded, insurance costs climbed, maintenance costs tripled, and social media began shaping where families spent their weekends. Slowly, the crowds thinned, and the laughter began to fade. By the summer of 2025, the writing was on the wall. The park made its final announcement: Dixielandin was closing. There was no grand farewell, no fireworks lighting the night sky, only a quiet acknowledgement of what everyone already knew. Families made one last trip through the gates, taking pictures beside the fading signs and worn benches. The smell of popcorn still hung in the air, but the sound of the rides had already grown still. For Baton Rouge, this wasn't just another business shutting down. It was a loss, stitched into the fabric of the city's memory. It was where first dates began, where high school bands played, where grandparents sat in the shade and watched their families grow. The end of Dixielandin wasn't just the end of a park. It was the end of a shared experience that tied a community together through decades of change. Today, the grounds sit silent, and nature is slowly reclaiming what people once called joy. Weeds creep through the pavement where crowds once stood, and rust gathers on the steel that once carried laughter into the air. The empty rides are still monuments of memory, reflecting sunlight like ghosts of motion. And somewhere in the heavy Louisiana air, the echoes of that lost summer still whisper that not everything built with heart can survive a world that measures worth in profit instead of pride. If you've ever set foot in one of these parks or remember what they used to mean, take a second to like this video, hit subscribe, and share your thoughts below, because the story of American fun deserves to be remembered. Six Flags, America. Maryland's summer pride, Six Flags, America, now fades away. Six Flags. America was more than a playground of rides and coasters. It was a living monument to regional pride. Families across Maryland, Virginia, and Washington, D.C. knew its skyline of steel, the smell of popcorn carried on humid air, and the echo of children's laughter bouncing off pavement long after the sun went down. For half a century, this place didn't just entertain. It became a marker of time, a ritual of youth and nostalgia that stitched generations together. The park began its life in the mid-1970s under another name, the Wildlife Preserve, when America still believed that regional amusement parks could capture the wonder of a national dream. Through the decades, it evolved into Six Flags America, reshaping itself with new attractions and themed lands that reflected the eras they were born in. For a while, it was Unstoppable, a patch of Maryland dirt that held some of the loudest, fastest, most talked about rides on the East Coast. Every summer felt like a celebration, every night like a festival. Fireworks cracked overhead, music spilled from loudspeakers, and the glow of lights made the air feel electric. But the story of Six Flags America turned like the slow click of a coaster chain before the drop. As the years wore on, the crowds grew thinner, maintenance costs climbed, safety rules tightened, and corporate oversight stretched resources thin. What once felt handcrafted and full of spirit began to feel calculated and cold. Local families noticed the difference. The charm faded, the magic began slipping through the cracks, attendance declined, and even the most loyal fans could see the park struggling to keep its spark alive. The very thing that made it special, a sense of regional identity, was being swallowed by the machinery of corporate standardization. In 2025, the final announcement arrived like the end of an era. Six Flags. America would close its gates for good. After more than 50 years of memories, the laughter stopped. Final summer came quietly, with visitors walking the midway in reflective silence, taking pictures in front of fading signs, knowing they were saying goodbye to something bigger than a park. It wasn't just the rides shutting down, it was the end of shared moments, first dates, family reunions, and the countless small stories that formed the park's soul. When the gates finally locked, the skyline of steel and wood stood motionless under the Maryland sun. Grass began to grow through cracks in the pavement, and the breeze carried a faint echo of what used to be. The silence felt heavier than expected, as if the laughter of decades lingered in the air, refusing to leave entirely. For those who grew up here, the loss wasn't just another business headline. It was the disappearance of a landmark that defined their summers. Six Flags. America may be gone, but the memories remain etched in every heart that once crossed those gates. Its fall stands as a stark reminder that even the biggest names in fun can fade, leaving behind only echoes of the joy they once gave. California's Great America. Joy once towered above Silicon Valley's skyline at Great America. It was born in the mid-1970s, when California's optimism was boundless, and families still spent weekends chasing laughter instead of deadlines. The park quickly became a part of the cultural fabric, its gates opening each morning to crowds who came not for luxury or spectacle, but for something pure, a place to escape, to scream, and to feel alive under the endless Santa Clara sky. The landscape that surrounded it changed faster than anyone expected. Orchards turned to office parks, dirt roads became expressways, and startups replaced the small-town shops that once dotted the valley. Yet Great America held its ground, offering a simple promise: one day of joy in exchange for everything the modern world took away. Its coasters stretched like steel signatures across the skyline, visible for miles on clear days. The smell of hot asphalt mixed with funnel cakes. The laughter of children carried over the drone of traffic from nearby freeways. To generations of locals, it wasn't just a theme park. It was a reminder that happiness didn't have to be complicated. Ownership changed hands multiple times, but the park endured. Through recessions, booms, and wildfires, it remained a sanctuary for the community. High school bands played there. First dates were born there, and families returned year after year to the same benches, the same rides, the same stories, in a region where everything old was constantly being replaced by something newer and shinier. Great America was the rare survivor, a piece of analog joy in a digital world. But time, as it always does, began to press harder against it. When word spread in 2022 that the land had been sold to a developer, the news hit like a punch to the gut. The park wasn't closing immediately, but everyone knew what that meant. Its days were numbered. Rumors spread, timelines shifted, but the ending felt inevitable. You could see it in the paint beginning to peel, in the long lines that weren't quite as long anymore, and in the way staff and visitors alike carried themselves, savoring what little time remained. By 2025, the truth had settled. In California's Great America would not survive the decade. The heartbreak wasn't just about the loss of rides or roller coasters. It was about the loss of something communal. For decades, the park had been one of the few places in Silicon Valley where people came together not to work or to network, but simply to feel. Now, the land that once rang with screams and laughter will soon be paved over with offices and warehouses. The coasters will come down, the lights will fade, and the smell of fresh popcorn will be replaced by concrete dust. When Great America finally closes, it won't just mark the end of a park, it will mark the end of an era. The joy that once defined Santa Clara will echo faintly for years to come, carried only in the memories of those who remember when happiness could still be found at the edge of a parking lot beneath the California sun. Cedar Point? Lake Erie's winds still whisper memories through Cedar Point's silence. Cedar Point is not just an amusement park, it is a monument to American imagination. For more than 150 years, it has loomed over Sandusky like a living skyline of thrill and nostalgia. From the moment its gates opened in the late 1800s, it became something more than a destination. It became a promise, a place where the spirit of invention met the simple joy of escape. Generations grew up beneath its roller coasters, and entire families made pilgrimages there each year to feel that familiar pulse of excitement that only Cedar Point could deliver. Every season, the park transformed the shores of Lake Erie into a spectacle of sound and color. The air was filled with the rattle of tracks, the hum of machinery, the laughter of crowds, and the smell of fresh-cut grass mixed with popcorn and sunscreen. The skyline told its own story, each new ride a symbol of ambition, each turn of steel an echo of a time when innovation was personal. Cedar Point was never content to stand still, it competed with itself, pushing higher and faster every decade. But beneath all the spectacle, what made it special was not its record-breaking rides. It was the ritual. The drive across the causeway at sunrise, the first glimpse of coasters rising out of the fog, the first rush of wind that erased a year's worth of worry. It was a reminder that joy, when shared, becomes heritage. Yet even the strongest traditions face the weight of time. The world around Cedar Point changed faster than anyone could have imagined. Streaming screens replaced road trips, and weekend outings turned into online distractions. As corporate hands shifted and new priorities took hold, the park began to feel the pressure of modern economics. Maintenance grew costlier, attendance less predictable, and the business of wonder became a fragile thing. For decades, Cedar Point had stood untouchable, but by the mid-2020s, cracks began to show in its armor. There were whispers of cost-cutting, speculation about closures, and quiet concern that the golden era of regional amusement might be coming to an end. Visitors noticed subtle changes, the paint a little more faded, the crowds a little thinner, the atmosphere slightly quieter. For locals who had spent their lives returning every summer, those details felt like warnings. They remembered the park at its loudest and brightest, when every ride felt like a celebration, and every night ended with fireworks over the lake. Now, some evenings pass without music, and the glow of nostalgia shines brighter than the lights themselves. Cedar Point's story is not one of failure, but of fragility. It remains open, but it stands as a reflection of the country that built it, restless, ambitious, and haunted by the fear of forgetting its roots. The coasters still rise into the blue Ohio sky, but beneath them lies the question of how long joy can survive in a world that measures everything by efficiency. For the millions who grew up on its shores, Cedar Point will always be more than a park. It will be a memory of what America once believed it could build, and the hope that some dreams are too deeply rooted to disappear. If you value real stories like this, subscribe now. More of America's hidden collapses and untold truths are coming, and you won't want to miss the next one, because what's fading today may be gone forever tomorrow. SeaWorld Orlando. Long before streaming screens and virtual escapes replaced real adventure, SeaWorld Orlando offered something different, an experience that felt alive. People came to feel the ocean's pulse, to watch dolphins glide in perfect rhythm with music, and to see orcas breach like living legends. It was Florida's saltwater cathedral, a place where sunburned families believed they'd glimpsed nature's majesty up close. But time has changed the tide. What once felt like wonder now feels like an artifact of another era, and the park that once defined aquatic awe is struggling to stay afloat. The problems didn't crash down overnight. They crept in like an incoming tide, slow, quiet, and impossible to ignore. Years of criticism over animal welfare began to fracture the park's image. Then came documentaries, news exposés, and public debates that rewired how people saw captivity itself. The shows that once filled stadiums with applause now carry the weight of moral unease. SeaWorld tried to adapt, adding new thrill rides, rebranding experiences, and focusing on rescue missions, but the emotional damage had already been done. For many visitors, the name no longer stood for magic. It stood for controversy. Beyond public perception, the numbers themselves tell a story of steady decline. Attendance dropped, profit margins tightened, and what used to be a multi-day family destination became a half-day stop between bigger names like Disney and Universal. Florida's theme park landscape became an arms race of spectacle, and SeaWorld's focus on conservation couldn't match the cinematic power or fantasy of its rivals. To survive, the park leaned harder into roller coasters and seasonal events moves that kept the gates open, but stripped away the unique soul that once defined it. The sea, once its essence, became a backdrop rather than a heartbeat. Walking through the park now feels bittersweet. The pathways are still clean, the landscaping still lush, the fountains still sparkling under the Florida sun. But the energy has shifted. The crowds are thinner, the lines shorter, and the signature shows that once drew gasps now earn polite applause. There's a quiet melancholy in the air, as if the park itself knows its glory days have passed. It's not that people don't care anymore, it's that they've moved on. The magic of SeaWorld once belonged to a generation that believed in ocean fantasy. Today's generation finds that same wonder online or in digital worlds. SeaWorld's decline mirrors something deeper in American culture, the fading of shared physical experiences. There was a time when a park could unite families around awe, when the smell of saltwater and sunscreen felt like freedom. Now, nostalgia fights to stay relevant against convenience and cost. The tragedy isn't just that SeaWorld may not survive, it's that what it represented, real, tangible connection to nature, has been replaced by screens and simulations. Even as its waves recede, SeaWorld remains a monument to an era when entertainment had meaning beyond profit. Yet its struggle is more than personal, it's symbolic, because what's happening here in Orlando isn't isolated. It's part of a nationwide unraveling, a slow and silent collapse that leads us to the heart of the storm waiting at number 1, Walt Disney World. For half a century, it stood as the heart of American escapism, a place where ordinary life was left at the gate and imagination took over. Walt Disney World wasn't just a theme park, it was a promise. Families saved for years to walk through those gates, to feel something larger than themselves, to believe in magic that never aged. But the cracks are showing in the kingdom that once defined joy. What was built as the pinnacle of fantasy is now weighed down by the realities of economics, politics, and shifting generations. The dream still flickers, but it no longer burns as bright. The numbers tell a story no one at the top wants to admit. Attendance has slipped across the board, and the park's once record-setting revenue can't mask growing visitor fatigue. Families who once returned every few years now look elsewhere, citing costs that feel impossible to justify. The average trip has become an exercise in endurance, not wonder. Ticket prices have soared, wait times stretch endlessly, and everything from food to souvenirs feels wrapped in corporate markup. For decades, Disney represented the best of American ambition. Now it's become a case study in how ambition overshoots itself. Behind the shimmering castles and fireworks, deeper problems linger. Debt from rapid expansions, slowed construction timelines, and massive operational costs have left even this empire cautious. The competition has grown sharper, the audience more divided, and the cultural landscape more volatile. Disney's biggest challenge isn't arrival, it's disillusionment. The once universal symbol of family unity now faces scrutiny from all sides. Some see it as a fading relic of simpler times. Others view it as a corporate giant out of touch with the people who built its legend. Walking through the park today, there's still awe, just a quieter kind. The monorail hums through the air, the castle still glows at dusk, and children still gasp at the parade of lights. But talk to the adults, and a different tone emerges. They remember when it felt affordable, spontaneous, and real. They remember when a single trip felt like entering another world, not another financial bracket. Beneath the spectacle, there's a fatigue that no show can hide. The illusion remains polished, but the magic feels strained, stretched thin over a world that's changed too fast for fairy tales to keep up. In many ways, Walt Disney World's story mirrors America's. Built on hope, expanded through innovation, and tested by time, it now stands at a crossroads, part monument, part warning. It reminds us that even the brightest dreams can become burdens when profit overshadows purpose. The collapse of smaller parks across the nation began this conversation, but Disney's struggle gives it meaning. If the most powerful name in entertainment can stumble, no one is immune. The age of endless expansion has reached its limit, and the fantasy that defined generations now faces reality's price tag. The Magic Kingdom will never vanish completely, but what's fading is the unshakable belief that it could last forever. The laughter still echoes, the lights still dance, but underneath it all, America's most famous dream now feels mortal, and that may be its most human moment yet. That's the state of the parks right now. Fast changes, real consequences, and a clock ticking faster than most people realize. Drop a comment with the park that surprised you most, hit like, and subscribe if you want more breakdowns like this. Thanks for watching. See you next time.